doing business in Africa. You can't afford to be without Africa Investor.
Okay, good morning everybody, and welcome to the Summit Conference 2020. This year's conference is all about partnering, shaping and growth, and the big subject is obviously COVID-19 and how do we emerge from this pandemic. Our speaker today is Hubert Danzo. Hubert has too long a profile for me to read it all out, and you've been sent the profile prior to the meeting, so I'll just pick out one or two highlights of Hubert's profile. So I think the whole Africa focus is something that's front and center for most companies these days, and Hubert is the CEO and chairman of the Africa Investor Group. He's also the current chair of the African Union's Development Agency, head of state Continental Business Network, the CBN. I'm sure Hubert will give us a bit more detail about that during his presentation. All of Hubert's accreditations are there for you to read. But Hubert, it's great to have you here, and I'm particularly excited about the work you're doing with the AU and what this means from a South African perspective, and obviously from a healthcare perspective. So we look forward to your insights, and over to you, Hubert.
Thank you very much, Marlon, and I'd also like to thank Samed for putting this excellent conference together and giving me the opportunity to just share a few remarks with you. As Marlon mentioned, I am the chairman and CEO of the Africa Investor Group and the African Union's Heads of State Continental Business Network. And as I sort of indicated, it's a real pleasure to be here and have the opportunity to share our continental healthcare industry policy and medtech initiatives that we're working on. And of course, during the discussions, learn from you as esteemed industry leaders in line with the conference theme of partnering to shape healthcare and grow medtech across Africa. By way of structure for this conversation, I'll just briefly introduce, as Marlon mentioned, the African Union Development Agency's Continental Business Network Heads of State platform, and then sort of zoom in a little bit on its healthcare focus. And then I'll just touch on, from the medtech and health tech perspective, the Africa PLC e-trade platform and the Africa PLC health supplier marketplace. And then just sort of just tell you a little bit about how we are also developing and working with artificial intelligence as it relates to the healthcare sector. And then I'll just conclude with some very brief words about how we feel the CBN and SAMED can partner to improve the regulatory environment to shape healthcare and grow medtech across the continent. And sort of just to get us started, as I mentioned, the African Union Heads of State established the Continental Business Network in June of 2015 as their exclusive infrastructure and private sector investment advisory platform to deepen the African investment community's participation, particularly in the Program for Infrastructure Development for Africa, the African Continental Free Trade Area, and really the overall promotion of institutional investor public partnerships, particularly with African pension funds and sovereign wealth funds. And in terms of the sort of the healthcare focus, as we all know, COVID-19 really highlighted the importance of healthcare infrastructure and healthcare and medicine security across the continent, and the urgent need to significantly increase investment into the industry and related regional value chains to support Agenda 2063, the Sustainable Development Goals, and the objectives of the $3.2 trillion African Continental Free Trade Area. So with that in mind, African pension and sovereign wealth funds through the Continental Business Network started to call for the investigation of the role which they can play through the use of capital, knowledge and portfolio companies to build Africa's healthcare system back better in a post-COVID-19 economy. So to achieve this, the Continental Business Network established the CBN Healthcare Infrastructure Working Group Initiative. The primary aim of the working group is to really strengthen Africa's healthcare and manufacturing industry and competitiveness in a sustainable manner, principally by mobilizing private capital allocations and finance for investable healthcare and supply chain related investment opportunities, and then linked into that to highlight policy bottlenecks and solutions that are capable of attracting long-term private capital to the continent's healthcare industry. So the CBN is really at the forefront of working to attract a blend of official development assistance and domestic and foreign direct investment, particularly investors concerned about the overall exposure and potential reliance on the production capacity of any single international country in terms of being able to supply and create disruption for any supply chains on the continent. We know that certain jurisdictions like the EU are offering some quite new and innovative and interesting long-term investment incentives through their member states to partner and collaborate with the private sector working in Africa on African healthcare related industries and projects in the name of continental interest to Europe, continental interest to Africa. So the working group's activities are really designed also to build on the African Union Development Agency's existing initiatives that they're championing to facilitate investment, principally into the infrastructure, the underlying infrastructure that's required, not only in healthcare, but also in agribusiness to address food security as well. And risk and the perception of risk and the actual risk are big issues that the African Union have created a number of platforms for. And our work in the healthcare sector through the Healthcare Working Group really picks up on those. One of them is called the African Infrastructure Investment Guarantee Mechanism, which really pulls together a lot of export credit facilities and instruments to de-risk transactions for private capital to be able to support healthcare infrastructure and infrastructure more generally. And then the co-guarantee platform, which is a joint initiative between the African Union Development Agency, the CBN and the African Development Bank to provide a suite of guarantees to really support African suppliers and manufacturers get access to both African and international markets. So you'll appreciate that the working group really collaborates widely with investors and stakeholders to crowd in domestic and international capital and blended finance to build and really sustain our global competitiveness and investment-friendly Pan-African healthcare initiatives, which we're going to really be putting forward to our heads of state and giving some very specific guidance about how what we do supports their vision for the implementation of Agenda 2063 and the African Continental Free Trade Area through boosting domestic manufacturing of medical supplies and medicines. In terms of the goals of our healthcare working group at the CBN, they're fourfold. One is to present the global attractiveness of Africa to, as we mentioned, domestic and foreign direct investors in key healthcare sectors like biotechnology, research and development, and many of those different subsectors that a number of you are playing a leadership role in. Second goal is really to support the African Continental Free Trade Area through the establishment of health care manufacturing hubs in special economic zones in each of the continent's 5 sub-regions, north, south, east, west, and central. The third key goal is to drive artificial intelligence innovation as an enabler of growth, encompassing solutions like mobile services, digitization and online procurement and logistics in this ever-increasing trade and customs distancing ecosystem that we have to work within. And the fourth goal is really to, as we've mentioned before, support the African Union to achieve the goals of Agenda 2063 through the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goal number 3, which is good health and well-being. There are 5 specific initiatives that we're currently driving in relation to accomplishing those same goals. The first is a bankable healthcare investment pipeline database initiative, where, as I mentioned before, we are principally a group of long-term institutional investors. So the best way that we think we can have an impact is by being able to deploy capital to healthcare-related investment opportunities. This particular initiative recognizes that there's not really a good centralized repository to be able to find bankable or investable healthcare-related opportunities. So this bankable healthcare investment pipeline database seeks to achieve that. And then second initiative, again, it's data-driven, which is the investable healthcare data initiative, which sort of really recognizes the fact that, identifying and being able to pool and find the transactions in one place is an issue, but then being able to get the data to be able to diligence and evaluate the investability of Africa's healthcare industry and its potential is also, there's a dearth of information that's organized in a coherent and centralized fashion. So this is designed to really identify and bring a lot of that data together to be able to help inform investment decisions. The third key initiative is our local and regional manufacturing initiative for medical supplies and medicines, which is drawing on a lot of the best practice used by a number of your own companies, as well as the international initiatives successfully implemented in the likes of Ireland, Israel, Malaysia, and a number of other countries that have really pioneered this particular model and public-private partnerships. The fourth key initiative is the healthcare digitization and digital health, or e-health initiative. We know there's a great deal going on that's complementary. Again, this is really our ability to just see in the same way that the fintech industry are beginning to map and better correlate and coordinate the fintech industry's initiatives as it relates to Africa and the globe. We're looking to just be able to get a better sense of what the e-health industry looks like on the continent, and find out ways to be able to back that with some venture capital where possible. And finally, we have the fifth sort of key initiative is our COVID-19 Build Back Better healthcare investment policy statement, which is really going to be a guiding and living document that we will use to set out our vision and our priorities, and the areas that we are asking the governments and heads of state to prioritize. The working group is also going to, which is quite important, leverage the African Union Heads of State 5% Infrastructure Investment Agenda, which is a new initiative that is designed to open up a new pool of capital. Approximately 5% of all pension fund and sovereign fund assets globally that are focused from African pension funds is now going to be directed towards infrastructure investment opportunities. And we are naturally lobbying for and promoting that healthcare infrastructure be as significant a proportion of that 5% as possible, and be integral to that particular agenda as an investable asset class or sub-asset class for African pension and sovereign wealth funds. So in terms of the the vision that we have and the vision statement. I mean, it really, I think many of you know and appreciate, it really just recognizes that the COVID-19 global pandemic has exposed the vulnerabilities of the health system globally, and the impact of health-related issues on the world's economy. So, sub-Saharan Africa takes up, 1% of the world's health expenditure, despite accounting for 13% of the world's population. And we know that it's also estimated that 25 billion to 30 billion of new investment will be needed for healthcare assets. So we need to be able to mobilize that capital. And as we, it's widely recognized that African healthcare PPPs are going to be integral to mobilizing that capital. We were on a meeting briefing the African Development Bank team just last week, and two of the big takeaways there were that healthcare PPPs on the continent have two issues. The suggestion is, although it's a sweeping general observation, but the feedback there was that healthcare PPPs on the continent are generally not properly structured to be able to secure the type of finance they're looking for, or they're not well presented. So our strategy is to really promote public-private sector collaboration to build that strong, investable continental healthcare system and policy environment, and the infrastructure that we know is much needed to be a catalyst for a resilient African economy, resilient and competitive African economy, of course. So our strategy is aligned with the principles of cooperation and existing policy commitments as reflected in various continental and global instruments. We don't think that more needs to be created. We just think that the best of the elements of the existing commitments just need to be implemented, and implemented in close collaboration and partnership with the private sector, particularly in line with the African Union's African Health Strategy of 2016 to 2030, and all those initiatives in support of the African Union Development Agency and NEPAD. Mindful that our goal is really very focused on the private sector's role in being able to increase investment into the healthcare sector. And so our real focus is really going to be how to mobilize that investment and that co-financing by raising the investment profile of the sector and all the good work that each of you are doing. The Agenda 2063, as you may know, is Africa's equivalent of and complement to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and works under the slogan of the Africa we want. So we're really going to be very focused on the key principles there, ESG investment principles, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and all of these other sort of sub-initiatives like sexual and reproductive health and rights, continental policy framework, and how it was revised in the Maputo Plan of Action, the Pharmaceutical Manufacturing Plan for Africa, PMPA, the Africa Regional Nutrition Strategy, and the Abuja Treaty Commitments, and a number of other key components, including the Global Strategy for Women, Children and Adolescents Health. So we're going to be very supportive to the African Union, and the NEPAD program in terms of their strategic priority implementations with technical expertise and financial resources to be able to implement those projects. And we'll be guided, as I say, we are a platform and a group of institutional investors, so impact and return on investment and investability are all going to be key preconditions and motivators for us to be able to responsibly discharge our fiduciary responsibilities to be able to invest. But we are very aligned with the industry and the continental initiatives. We aim to really implement sustainable funding mechanisms and healthcare solutions through these public-private partnerships and collaboration that are predominantly focused on, when we work internationally with international partners, that are predominantly focused on technology transfer, As many of you know, the most productive foreign direct investments that we see on the continent, and research bears this out, are the ones that have really enhanced technology transfer. So that's going to be a key feature of our thinking and our approach. But we're really going to be looking for opportunities, and hopefully originating some of those opportunities from SAMED and yourselves, on sustainable infrastructure and value chain, healthcare value chain related infrastructure investment opportunities that we can mobilize capital for. So really, I think in terms of the vision, it's really about the development of healthcare ecosystems that will stimulate economic growth in Africa's middle class by creating those value chains, increasing local manufacturing, creating jobs, and achieving technological advancement, research, development, and medical tourism, amongst some of the other areas. And as we know, international best practice has really demonstrated that the utilization of the full engagement of the healthcare ecosystem on a horizontal, not so much a vertical basis, is one of the key ingredients for a successful strategy for economic transformation in the sector. And that's the sort of approach that we are, and philosophy we're adopting and taking at the CBN as it relates to healthcare. So we're really going to be emphasizing that PPP component and collaborating with the public sector to deliver a more hospitable policy and regulatory environment for Africa's private sector to deliver increased investment, growth, and overall strategic implementation. In terms of our medtech, health tech, our trade, our e-trade technology and medtech platform is called Africa PLC. It's a private sector-led multi-sector version of the African Union's medical suppliers portal. Our vision for Africa PLC is to deliver an industrial e-trade platform that connects the $3.2 trillion African continental free trade area with global markets by simplifying cross-border trade and procurement transactions for small and medium-sized enterprises, large enterprises, financial institutions, aid agencies, and governments. Essentially, Africa PLC is an innovative business-to-business and business-to-government multi-sector industrial e-commerce platform and fintech marketplace focused on improving intra-African trade flows, cross-border payments, supply chain transparency, logistics, and access to trade intelligence and global markets. In essence, Africa PLC provides secure and easy to use transaction platforms and is continually innovating sort of blockchain and RegTech trade enabling solutions to assist our clients and partners digitally originate, transact, track, and settle B2B and B2G transactions across the African continent and worldwide. And the initiative is supported by the African Union Development Agency, our Continental Business Network, the International Chamber of Commerce, DHL, the Chartered Institute of Purchasing and Supply, and the African Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat. The platform itself, I think, which is of more relevance to us now, has a dedicated Africa PLC healthcare vertical marketplace called Africa PLC Health, our own medtech platform in many respects, and the Africa PLC Health COVID-19 supplier platform supports African governments and the private sector respond to the COVID-19 pandemic by facilitating ordering, crowd buying, logistics, and a payment solution for healthcare more generally, but also PPE, supplies, and equipment. The Africa PLC healthcare platform is essentially probably the largest, if not one of the largest, healthcare supplier, private sector supplier platforms, currently with over 8,500 vetted suppliers and over 10,000 product types currently on the platform. Africa PLC Health platform has already facilitated the purchase of over 45 million pieces of PPE to the tune of over $80 million since March of this year. And it has a state-of-the-art, industry-aligned vetting process, and it can obviously categorize key products that are submitted to the portal. It captures all the schedules of pricing, all of the logistics-related issues of delivery, maps intelligently stock availability, different locations, different production cycles, manufacturing capacity, and it's a great tool, obviously, for forecasting, which is one of the essential things we all have to do, both within business and government, as we tackle this particular pandemic, and unfortunately prepare for future pandemics, which, as we know, are cyclical. Every 4 to 6 years, unfortunately, we can expect the same or something similar that we, as the private sector, will need to play a very critical leadership role in addressing. Africa PLC also offers a supply chain finance tech facility under our fintech component to companies and governments that are procuring and transacting on the Africa PLC marketplace. And this is typically used to support working capital needs and assist small and medium-sized suppliers to be paid early, so that we're well endowed from a working capital standpoint to be able to continue to transact, trade, and compete. Our supply chain finance solutions, which effectively use capital market instruments, are currently being offered to the National Health Service in the UK to be able to pay staff early so that they can purchase essential extras to protect themselves and their families from the coronavirus. I think it's sort of well understood that we need to relieve unnecessary strain on our hospital infrastructure. So at a practical level, Africa PLC believes that, as many of you will, I'm sure that treatment happens in the hospital and healthcare happens outside the hospital. So we, really focus on artificial intelligence and see artificial intelligence as an important tool in this effort, where Africa PLC is currently developing a software as a service SaaS platform for hospitals and medical facilities to bridge the gap between the two by ensuring that it manages both treatment and healthcare data to support patients wherever they are. So in that respect, Africa PLC will increasingly use artificial intelligence modules to help detect abnormalities, detect early outbreaks, and monitor mobility and the evolution of diseases via timely data analytics. The Africa PLC team is making healthcare accessible to everyone by empowering patients. It's very committed to that, and healthcare service providers alike, with tools and resources to connect with healthcare at their fingertips, and as a result improve and save lives. The Africa PLC artificial intelligence platform that's under development will be accessible through a mobile app, USSD, and a software as a service platform, and it will be driven by one unique user ID, which basically means it doesn't matter which hospital you belong to, the information will be the same, and your data can be viewed by the last hospital in real time, which is essentially one of the key objectives, which is to bring and sort of to be able to create a centralized management system for patient data. So the platform will therefore be artificial intelligence driven, and be both a centralized and a decentralized system. Centralized, as it will allow for healthcare facilities to provide services to patients outside of the hospitals, and will provide a seamless flow of patient data across multiple hospitals that use the platform. Decentralized in terms that it will allow for users to store their health information like symptoms, prescriptions, medication, and health records for themselves and their family. So this particular platform will, in many respects, analyze both structured and unstructured data being captured by the users. It will provide access to multiple sources of data points. It will use artificial intelligence to analyze and reveal patterns in diseases. It will provide data analytics to support and efficiently manage the spread of diseases, and resource mobilization and patient support in real time. So, there are sort of just, the key sort of features are healthcare data reporting, symptoms tracking, telehealth, providing healthcare content, and also being able to conduct and analyze healthcare surveys. So essentially, the Africa PLC Health Artificial Intelligence platform under development will offer a seamless interface for healthcare service providers that will allow for real-time patient management and communication as a platform. Hospital doctors and various healthcare providers will be able to consult with patients remotely and offer first-line support. It will be able to, a key feature will be disease tracking, monitoring and surveillance to allow for emergency and data-driven interventions. It will represent a training tool and platform for health workers and an information distribution channel to communities. And as I mentioned before, it will provide real-time centralized information management that is also capable of being segmented geographically. I think finally, in terms of the healthcare industry regulations and the standardization agenda, I think we're all aware that harmonizing the standards of pharmaceutical products and medical devices in Africa is a crucial step in facilitating local production and trade across the healthcare industry. We see great opportunity for the Continental Business Network and SAMED to collaborate and offer both our organizations and networks great benefits at the policy as well as the commercial level. We think that collaboration on standards harmonization really does mean deepening not only our networks with our regional brothers and sisters, but transacting with each other on both a commercial and a policy development level. So we really need to, and we're really encouraging our ability, our combined efforts to forge and consolidate our strategic engagement and be the commercial engine to positively support the African Continental Free Trade Area, Agenda 2063, and the Sustainable Development Goals through commercial activity and trade. As the private sector, you'll be interested to know, the African Continental Free Trade Area leadership just last week announced that they will be prioritizing regional and domestic standards harmonization as a key priority for 2021. And the African Export-Import Bank and the International Islamic Trade Finance Corporation, for example, have already responded to that this week by announcing a partnership with the African Organization for Standardization, ARSO, to facilitate intra-African trade in pharmaceutical and medical devices under the umbrella of the Arab Trade Bridges Program, the AATB program. So this new Afrexim Bank initiative aims to harmonize African standards for pharmaceuticals and medical devices, thereby enhancing intra-African trade, reducing standard or essentially substandard and counterfeit products, and building resilient healthcare systems on our continent. So essentially, I think the question for us today is how can the CBN and SAMED and the broader South African healthcare business community working across the continent provide leadership and collaborate to improve the healthcare industry and system. I think that's the question that we are posing, and I know that this conference will answer many of those issues and squarely address that particular question. So in closing, I think as we know, the growth statistics and the population dynamic for the continent are very compelling to the global trade and investment community, and they should therefore be equally compelling, if not more compelling, first and foremost, to us. I mean, you know, we are at the heart of this increasingly large population growing, projected to grow up to about 2 billion, with a youth bulge. But the reality is the current opportunity to leapfrog into the fourth industrial revolution is finite. So we really need to, you know, have that plan in place and put those resources behind those plans. Because we believe that, you know, really to succeed, the private sector needs to expect less of government and more of itself, or more of ourselves. So sort of in the name of genuine continental solidarity, we encourage, you know, that we, you know, let's really optimally develop implementable solutions, and really further partner and support governments to diligence and implement proposals, our proposals, you know, rather than, I suppose, in some cases, infer and signpost challenges, because after all, you know, we have that knowledge as the private sector to know best how to implement and navigate the intricacies of what we are proposing should be implemented. And we probably have proprietary access to the data that will accelerate that particular process. So my last point is that really access to global markets should be more prominent and feature more prominently on our roadmap as the industry, where we as the African private operators and companies could be and should be competing for and supplying goods and services into global markets, and working with our governments and trade and investment missions to better employ their political infrastructure and capital around the world and across the continent to share procurement and medtech opportunities, and more efficiently and effectively promote us as the African healthcare related industry for opportunities that are in global particular markets. So I suppose I really am just asking that you know, that we all really make this conference today the catalytic call for urgency and action for African private sector leadership to shape the continent's healthcare system in the name of the African Continental Free Trade Area, that you know, will really be operational in a mere matter of weeks on the 1st of January 2021, after President Cyril Ramaphosa hosts the final summit on the 5th of December here in South Africa. He will host a Heads of State summit that will finalize all of the last arrangements to send the African Continental Free Trade Area into operation on the 1st of January 2021. So in the spirit of Ubuntu, I thank you for your attention and partnership to build the Africa we want. I thank you very much for this opportunity. Over to you, moderator.
Thank you, Hubert, for that comprehensive analysis of the opportunity to grow healthcare in Africa, in keeping with the theme of the conference, partnering, shaping. I think that's what you encourage us to do today, is to try to shape the healthcare environment in Africa through some of the initiatives that you're involved with, and the other is about the partnerships. And I think that you've suggested a few. I just want to highlight 3 areas I picked up during your presentation that are of significance for us as a medtech industry. The one, and I think the one where we've kind of been quite strong as SAMED, is in the area of regulatory harmonization in particular. And I think that there's an opportunity there for us to continue and strengthen that engagement with with the governments in Africa on the regulatory harmonization. That's the first one. The second one is in terms of financing infrastructure. Sorry, can we all mute our microphones, please? There is a bit of an echo in the background. So the second one is the whole issue of financing. And having done a bit of work in the space, I know quite well that the challenge with financing of healthcare infrastructure, which you mentioned, is largely in the area of the feasibility work and the financing of the feasibility. I think that if combined, we can pay some attention to that area, we could get a better outcome in terms of infrastructure healthcare projects that then feed into how our industry supplies their products into that infrastructure. I think that's an area we need to pay very careful attention to and look at how we can partner as an industry with the not only your agency but all of the financing agencies that are working in Africa. That's the second part. Then the last part, I think, speaks to the operational aspects that relate to the ease of doing business. And maybe let me correct that, the efficiency of doing business, because business is not easy to do. I think if we can align our policy engagements at SARMED with the Africa Free Trade Agreement initiatives related to healthcare, with some of the Africa Agenda 2063 initiatives, I think we can start to improve healthcare generally in Africa as we emerge from the COVID environment. So those are just my initial thoughts, and maybe your comments on those before we open it up to the rest of the floor. Thanks. Hubert, you're still on mute. Can you unmute yourself, Hubert?
Great. I hope you can hear me now. Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, wonderful. Yes, well, thank you for those reflections and comments, Marlon. I think the most important thing is that we recognize that there is a very important platform and opportunity for us now that is very keen to receive our input and collaboration in the form of the Continental Business Network that can give us that continental reach and address a number of these regulatory and operational challenges that that really creates that business friction and adds unnecessary layers of complexity and cost to our operations. There's a very good recognition and platform within the CBN, and it's links into the heads of state to be able to do that. And there's a great deal of content and leadership within the South African healthcare and medtech industry. So we think that there's a perfect opportunity to align and really have continental impact as we are going to really be at the forefront of driving the healthcare industry both across the continent and from the continent into the rest of the world. To your point about the feasibility studies and the project development components of putting together a number of the different sort of healthcare and health tech related transactions, this is a little bit of a philosophical issue, because the project preparation agenda has really been structured in such a way that it's very grant driven. It's supported primarily and principally by development partner support or development finance institution grants and or technical assistance. And what we found is that you tend to end up with a great loss of institutional memory in those particular transactions, because it's almost invariably procured out to an external consultant that will put a plan together and just sort of give it back to the government, because it's typically majoritively the government that gets access to those particular facilities. And what we're proposing is much more of a project development related instrument, which, unlike project preparation tends to develop very specific aspects of moving something from a pre-feasibility study to a bankable feasibility study to ultimately being able to use that as a tool to reach financial close. So we're actually advocating for a lot more project development to support private sector project developers and let developers actually get the assistance and the capital directly, either through a project development loan or project development equity that takes account of assisting those transactions, not just get key studies done, but also bring on board the lawyers, the advisors, the transaction advisors to actually get those particular projects to financial close. And I think, you know, in terms of the African Continental Free Trade Area, you know, to use the words at the announcement of the African Continental Free Trade Area just last week, when they were talking about their focus is going to be on regional standards that should support the private sector, they were very clear. This is what you as the private sector have been asking for. Let's work together to get this done, because we're doing this for you, but we don't actually understand everything that's important to you. We are partners in this. There are two key objectives for the African Continental Free Trade Area. One is to, you know, obviously grow the intra-African trade level from the very low 16% to a much higher double-digit level post, you know, more than greater than 50%. But also to use the platform that the continent will represent through the increased and efficiency gains and competitiveness from the African Continental Free Trade Area to enable Africa to be able to compete in global markets. We're currently, what, 1% of, you know, what, less than 2% of global trade, with our population being significantly higher than that. So we really are going to be working strategically to be able to leverage the African Continental Free Trade Area to be able to get access to global markets. So I think this joined up thinking and the expertise from within the industry really marks an unprecedented opportunity, as I mentioned, compounded by the fact that we don't necessarily have to carry a lot of legacy technology to be able to be a front runner in the healthcare industry as it relates to the fourth industrial revolution. But I just caveat that by saying the opportunities and the time frame for being able to take full advantage of that are limited. So it's really going to, you know, require us all to work together in the same spirit, with the same sense of urgency and patience in some cases, and recognize, as I mentioned, gone are the days where we can come up with a good policy and feel that out of the public or the private sector, it's really something that the private sector should do in theory. You know, we have to work in practice, and if we have the data and the expertise to be able to expedite that, then that's what we are calling for. That's what we're simply saying, let's do that. Because we know that the benefits that we are you know, advocating and lobbying our counterparts to be able to take on board, we can realize them ourselves in many respects. So we're really encouraging us to move more from the advocacy to implementing areas and our recommendations, even if we don't feel you know, that they are really you know, our prime responsibility to implement. So with those few words, I'll pass back to you, Marlon.
Yeah, thanks, Hubert. Okay, so let's open it up to the floor, and if there are any questions, Nikki, if you can help me with the hands up module. I don't have that facility right now. And yeah, I think from a medtech perspective, I'd just like to hear from the audience what their impression is of doing business in Africa in the first place, from a product perspective, and some of the challenges that you encounter on a day-to-day basis, which possibly have been compounded by COVID, and how we emerge from that. So yeah, any questions from the floor, from the audience? While we're waiting for questions, just a thought about practically knowing that there are medtech companies who are participating in this conference who probably have a footprint in Africa, and typically the idea is, like you mentioned, to have these regional hubs in East and West Africa, you know, in the first instance. Thinking about what you mentioned in terms of some of the work you've been doing, what do you see as the immediate opportunities for example, companies who have, on the one hand, direct offices in these regional hubs, and then on the other hand, the smaller companies who work through distributors? What is the immediate opportunity for them to leverage not only your platform, but some of the other activities with the African Free Trade Agreement immediately. So if we're looking to get out of this COVID environment, what would be your recommendation immediately to where to start?
I think the immediate opportunity and need is to create better data asymmetry in terms of centralizing and making it easier for people, first of all, to understand where the opportunity and the need is, and then being able to direct and open up those opportunities to companies and service providers that are best placed to take care of that. And that's really what we've sought to begin through the Africa PLC, a platform where you can actually find information on where the opportunities are, and the regional members and the local members across the continent will be key partners and allies in bringing more of that information and intelligence to the fore, to be able to address this data asymmetry. Another thing that we're encouraging is the ability to be more forward-leaning in terms of looking for those pan-continental partnership opportunities. South African companies working with other companies across the continent and vice versa, and getting ideas and getting feedback and experience from SAMED members and SAMED members or network or constituent members that have local offices, and really beginning to build some strategic intent to be able to create collaboration, to be able to bid for projects that ultimately maybe they wouldn't have been able to do or accomplish or qualify for in their own right. So this sort of ability to create those partnerships, one on the data level, I think is going to be very important. Two, in terms of being able to highlight where and centralize where the procurement and transaction opportunities are. And three, just, build those partnerships, build those commercial and transactional partnerships very deliberately. And let's sort of understand that we can actually, get better access to those commercial opportunities in this spirit of working together. Because these opportunities are going to become, are going to be quite sizable in some respects. They're going to need, urgent and quick turnarounds, and technology has just dramatically accelerated the expectation in terms of being able to fulfill some of these requirements. So that ability to be able to be as organized and prepared, and as I mentioned, the African Continental Free Trade Area becomes operational January 1. So I always caution colleagues that from the private sector that say, but is it going to work, and is it this? I then ask them, are you prepared? Are you prepared today? How many new relationships or how many existing relationships have you aligned to be able to fully take advantage of it? So I think we also need to be mindful that there's some preparation work on our part to be able to unlock those benefits. Globally, we deal with delegations every day that are organizing themselves to be able to take full commercial advantage of the African Continental Free Trade Area. And I just continue to urge that that our own private sector, whilst looking at what the public sector could or should be doing, we really take the opportunity to recognize that there's a lot more that we could be doing within our own companies, within our own private sector ecosystems, to be right at the forefront of getting access to those commercial benefits offered by the African Continental Free Trade Area.
Marlon, it's Avanti.
Thanks.
Okay.
Go ahead, Avanti.
Yeah, just a final comment from me. I see we're out of time, so I'll try and be as quick as possible. Just in terms of some of the regulatory sides of doing things, especially over this COVID period, I think on a positive note, we did see that many countries, even before South Africa, established COVID expedited pathways, such as Ghana, such as Nigeria, such as Kenya. And that allowed, I think, a fair amount of rapid response to accepting these medtech products into those countries by these expedited regulatory pathways. Contrary to that, we then saw countries that actually completely blocked COVID products into their countries. And here I'm talking about probably French West Africa that said only CE marked products, whereas, the US had an emergency use process in place. We had countries like Tanzania saying we do not want any COVID products being registered right now. They're only looking at a particular one. So I think throughout the past few months, what we've seen is some level of agility and flexibility, certainly in the more mature regulated markets. And contrary to that, we saw countries which actually just put out their borders and said, sorry, we're not going to do it. So I think the learning for us is that we do need to work with the ministries of health. I'm happy to see the reliance on WHO. But that does create a bit of a backlog when WHO takes a bit longer to release policies and guidelines and these countries wait for it. So a mixed bag, I think, for us working in Africa, but certainly more positive than negative, especially in light of the COVID pandemic. Thanks, Marlon.
Thanks for that comment, Avanti. So just to wrap up, Hubert, I think Avanti just alludes to maybe your support at AU level for this alignment to ease the business component of the medtech industry as we move forward. So we'll be reaching out to you for that kind of support and collaboration as we move along. So on that note, I think I just want to thank you for your wise words and encouraging us to be ready and be prepared to take advantage of the Africa Free Trade Agreement that's coming. And we'll certainly stay in contact as we move forward and as we align and partner as the theme of the conference is. So thanks again, Hubert, and thanks to everybody for joining this segment. Have a good day, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you very much, everybody. It's been a pleasure. We look forward to working with you. All the best.
Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.
Doing business in Africa. You can't afford to be without Africa Investor.